ॐ निरञ्जनं नित्यम् अनन्तरूपं भक्तानुकम्पाधृतविग्रहं वै ईशावतारं परमेशमीड्यं तं रामकृष्णं शिरसा नमामः. Namaste everyone to the Thursday evening study of the what we are studying now are the Vedanta lectures of Swami Vivekananda. We are starting with this lecture that was delivered in Lahore, a pretty long lecture. And then later on we'll select and go through about 8, 10 of them to get an idea of how Swami Vivekananda preached Vedanta. So we were somewhere around here, the Upanishadic theme, seeking the ultimate unity. Let's do a little bit of revision and then continue. Now, Swamiji says, it is true that the Upanishads have this one theme before them. So, what is the central theme of the Upanishads? What are they looking for? What is the question they're trying to answer? And it is taught in the Mundaka Upanishad, where the student goes to the teacher and asks a very smart question. The question is, kasminnu bhagavo vijnate sarvamidam vijnatam bhavati iti. What is that knowing which we know everything else? And Swamiji explains that this is the theme, not only during that Upanishadic seekers time, but in the modern times also. In the modern language, the theme of the Upanishad is to find the ultimate unity of things. Knowledge, or the goal of knowledge, is nothing but finding the unity in the midst of diversity. Every science is based upon this. That means the physical sciences. All human knowledge is based upon finding the unity in the midst of diversity. And if it is the task of small fragments of human knowledge, which we call our sciences, to find unity in the midst of few different phenomena, the task becomes stupendous when the theme before us is to find the unity in the midst of the marvelously diversified universe, where prevail unnumbered differences in name and form, in matter and spirit, each thought differing from every other thought, each form differing from every other form. And yet to harmonize these many planes and unending locus in the midst of this infinite variety, to find the unity, that is the theme of the Upanishads. So if we look at our knowledge in the science, what we're seeking, what are the scientists trying to find out? Well, in physics, they would like to find that one particle or one source out of which all the particles have come. And someone thought there was one, and they called it the God particle or the Higgs boson, or one force, the unified field force theory, as Einstein was trying to do. One equation that will represent everything, one fundamental source out of which everything has come. And that is in each different science in our physical world. And there are different planes that are not even tapped, the mental plane, the spiritual plane, or as in the Vedanta or scriptures, they call there are 7 planes of existence, Bhurbhuva Swaha, the whole Prakriti. Now I take that and say, what is the one out of which this whole, not this our world or this planet or the solar system or our Milky Way galaxy or this universe, but whatever universes there, everything, what have they come out of? And if I know that, then I will know all of them. So that is the type of pursuit that the Vedic sages embarked upon thousands of years ago. And they found the answers too. And that's where the Upanishads, the Vedanta, the Anta, the culmination of the spiritual knowledge, is that truth. So slowly we will approach that. So then Swamiji says, on the other hand, the old idea of Arundhati Nyaya applies. So he explains this. To show a man the fine star Arundhati, one takes the big and brilliant star nearest to it, and upon which he is asked to fix his eyes first, and then it becomes quite easy uh, to direct that person's attention to the direct his sight to the Arundhati star. So Arundhati is a star in the sky. It's very faint. So if you try to point it out to somebody, you'll find that he will say, what are you trying to show me? So the person who is trying to teach or direct the attention, he says, picks up one of the brighter stars next to it, which is easier to see. And he says, "Hey, do you see that?" And he says, "Yeah, I can see that." Using that as a reference, then he says, "Okay, look to the right or left and say, can you see the faint one?" By that time, what you have done is steered the attention or caught the attention of the observer and given it a location. And using that as a reference, then you say, you guide, that's the finer star that you see. So the teachings or the Atman or the essential nature of man is something very fine and very subtle. It's not like the bright star, the gross thing that can be seen. And so the teachers use the method of directing the attention step by step, starting with the gross, and then you go finer and finer, and then they're able to reach, observe, or experience that thing. So that approach is called Arundhati Nyaya. Okay, the method of reasoning starting from the gross, going to the subtle. So in the Upanishads, so this is the task before us. To prove my idea, I will simply, I have simply to show you the Upanishads and you will see it. Nearly every chapter begins with a dualistic teaching, Upasana. So in the Upanishads, they don't immediately go to that finest, highest teaching. They start with a dualistic teaching. We are comfortable with that. And they are called upasanas. The word upasana means upa asana. Upa means nearby, like Upanishad, upavas, uh, the word. And asana means, of course, the seat. So it means you are placing your mind next or close to the object of your meditation. So there are all this in this earlier chapters, these various upasanas are taught, the various meditations are there. So God is first taught as someone who is the creator of the universe, its preserver, and unto whom everything goes at last. We are familiar with that, we understand that something must come, somebody creates it, somebody takes care of it. So it's an easy idea to start with. And that's why in our Hindu Trinity, we have Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara. Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the preserver, the maintainer, and Maheshwara is the one who doesn't destroy, he resolves or absorbs that forms into the formless one. So, Srishti, Sthiti, Vinasha. Three different beings have been given this functional portfolios or responsibilities. Later on, you'll see that all that has been transferred to only one deity, which is the Divine Mother. So, and this in the evenings everywhere, you will see Srishti Sthiti Vinashanam Shakti Bhute Sanatani Gunashray Gunamaye Narayani Namostute. So we are, it's easier for us to grasp there has to be a being who has to create it, who has created this world and who will maintain it, to whom we can pray and all that. So that's the starting point. He is the one to be worshipped. He is the ruler, Ishvara. He is the guide of the nature who dwells immanent in everything and external to it, external and internal, and yet appearing as if he were outside of nature and external. So these are the qualities of the Ishvara. Everything happens by his grace will. He is the controller. Ishvara means the one who controls, because we see the sages observe that this world is not going in a random chaotic way. There is order. Things are happening in a beautiful rhythm. And there are the lunar cycle or the daily cycles and the lunar cycles and the annual cycles, and everything is going in a beautiful way. And so they deduce there must be somebody, some force or some power which is holding everything in this beautiful balance. The older Vedic word for that universal power that is responsible for maintaining order and rhythm is the word Ritam, Ritam. Those who are familiar with the Aratis song composed by Swami Vivekananda, it starts with Om, Hrim, Ritam. So rhythm means that cosmic uh, power that is responsible for holding everything in order. It's not the physical order, it's the subtle force behind the universe, and it sort of keeps everything in a beautiful rhythm in there. And so long we are tuned to that rhythm, we also will find that there's an inner peace and harmony. And when that rhythm is disturbed for some reason, then we struggle to get back. And if we succeed, then we regain our peace of mind or health. But when we are struggling and getting stressed out, then all the problems of anxiety and all those things begins to develop. So they understood that there is this cosmic energy behind this universe and somebody who controls that energy behind the universe, and that is the Ishvara. That Ishvara also is dwelling within us. And that aspect which dwells within us is called Antaryami, or the inner controller. So the macrocosmic being is called Brahman. The microcosmic means within the individual, that is called the Atman. And later on, at the end of when you go to the end of the Upanishad, they will say the Atman and Brahman are the same being. They're not actually, they appear to be different, but they are really the same. So we start with that. See this beautiful nature, and they personified these various forces of nature. They saw this water, and so there's a being who is controlling the water and the ocean. So he's the Varuna Devata. There's fire, so there's Agni Devata, and all that different deities were given, or the different forces of nature were given a name and worshipped. That's how it started. Then at last, so where is go? Okay. One step further, we find that the same teacher teaching that this God is not outside of nature, but immanent in nature. So this is a very important idea. Normally, when we think of some God, he is an extra cosmic being who has created the universe, and then remotely he is exercising control over it as somebody outside here. They give the example of somebody who has built up a mechanical clock and he has wound it up, and now he's watches and the clock is going tick tock, tick tock. He exists outside the clock. He's the maker of the thing. But the Vedic teachers found that that being is not really outside somewhere in some transcendental plane. He is transcendental as well as immanent in nature. Immanent means he pervades everything here and now. That means from the smallest atom to the biggest universe, in everything he is present. And those ideas are sometimes expressed beautifully in our songs and things. For example, if you remember, Roma Roma me vasane vale Ram, that means the one who dwells even every hair on the body. He pervades everything. This is a very powerful idea because, and in this age, Swami Vivekananda once said that, what will Sri Ramakrishna be remembered and known for is that he realized this power immanent in everything, and that power he called the Divine Mother, and worship that Shakti. So Brahman is that transcendental aspect of it. Shakti is the eminent aspect of it, and we are all in the realm of Shakti. So body is out of Shakti, physical body, our mind, our ego, everything is manufactured out of that energy of the Divine Mother called Shakti. And it is her Shakti that flows through all of us in our thoughts, in our in deeds, and when we become aware of her presence in our own selves, and we approach her to be gracious to us so that those energies that function through us become propitious and become introverted or guide us towards the path of nivritti rather than taking away towards pravritti, That is why we worship the Divine Mother. And she is worshipped in different forms. And we just had Navaratri, where she has been worshipped as Durga. And come Diwali, she'll be worshipped as Kali, and then Saraswati, and all that. So this is the immanent being. So in the Upanishads, they talk about the transcendental Brahman and as also the same being as being immanent, pervading, alive, dynamic, present here and now, sort of say, within our own hearts, as the Antaryami, as the inner controller. And so, at last, both ideas are discarded, and whatever is real is He. There is no difference. So, there is actually this external and internal, and transcendental and immanent are just struggles of the human mind, because human minds uh, can grasp things intellectually with the help of ideas. And ideas are by nature definitions. They define some things, they limit and put a boundary and say, this is this, as separate from that. But when they try to limit that or define that infinite being, they say, oh, there's no such word. Brahman means it's just vast, brihat, it's infinite. So they said, oh, there cannot be a positive definition of the Supreme Being. All we can say it's not this, not this, not this. Ultimately, what it is, that is it. So the path is called neti, neti, neti. Na iti, na iti, na iti. It's not physical, it's not mental, it's not um, what do you call intelligence or ego. Whatever remains, that is the being. And that tattvamasi, O Shvatiketu, thou art that. That means apparently, even though you are identified as this individual with a body and a mind and ego, etc., but the consciousness that is within you and the consciousness that is behind the whole universe, tat tvam asi. Tat means the consciousness behind the whole universe, which is Brahman. Tvam, thou, is the consciousness that is within you, which is the Atman, are the same. Tat tvam asi. This is one of the Mahavakyas out of the Upanishads, that in one small sentence or formula captures the essence of the whole Vedas. So this is where it culminates in. That would be the Veda Anta, culmination of the Vedic knowledge. It starts with the worship of the divine behind all the forces of nature. Then is understood to be immanent in everything, is worshipped there through different upasanas and things. And as we go from the grosser to subtle, ultimately within the depths of our own realizations, we come and experience ourselves, not understanding. The mind has stopped functioning there at that time. It is an experience, anubhuti. And at that moment, one experiences oneself as a pure consciousness. And then there one realizes that that consciousness that is within us is the same consciousness that's behind the whole universe. And so, in the previous section we were looking at, the goal was to find that unity. That was the question that was asked. What is that knowing which everything else can be known? And so the answer was, if you know the spiritual self that you are within you, out, that is the same spiritual self behind the universe, and that is that one unity out of which all this diversity has come. You know the white light, and you know that out of that white light has come out this whole spectrum of colors that are there. So that was this wonderful approach of the Vedic rishis. That's how they approached a path they took to the approach they took to discern or decipher the mystery of this universe. And Swamiji says that immanent one is at last declared to be the same that is in the human soul. So the Jivatma is the same as the Paramatman. Acharya Shankara, who wrote the commentaries on the Upanishads, says, look, I can give you the essence, of the whole Vedanta, Upanishads, not in two verses, two line verses, in one half of it. He says, Brahma Satya Jagan Mithya Jiva Brahmaeva na apara. That means Jiva Brahma eva na apara. That which is within us and that which is the Brahman behind the whole universe, they are the same, not different from each other. So that is the culmination of the Vedic knowledge. And they did thousands of years ago. Even before the books were written, these things were, these teachings were again and again experimented and realized by people who took, just like in the modern age, people spend so much time and effort in laboratories and researching and searching. And some of them come across some small discovery for which they might get a little Nobel Prize or something like that. Here, the Vedic rishis, in the laboratory of their own minds, of the laboratory in their own souls, they realized that one universal being, and again verified that. It's not that just one person realized it and the whole religion was named after him. Unlike various other religions who are named by the founders, like Christianity or Buddhism, etc., here there is no one single author of the Vedas. It is like science doesn't belong to any one person. Various scientists throughout the world uh, verify the same conclusions if somebody proposes that. So in this, the over thousands of years, in every generation, in every age, these rishis would go into the depths of the forests and in a quiet place, dive deep within themselves and realize that, and then share that knowledge. And that's how they have kept that spiritual tradition alive. Now and then it becomes a bit dim, and at that time, some great soul, some great spiritual teachers, incarnations, and Ishwar Kotis come and revive that and again set it very clearly bright in front of the society. So that eminent one is at last declared to be the same that is in the human soul. In this, there is no compromise. Here is no fear of others' opinions because it's not intellectual something that you're trying to convince others. It is one's own experience, and experience cannot be denied. It's a direct, they call it, direct experience. So truth, bold truth has been taught in bold language, and we need not fear to preach the truth in the same bold language today. And by the grace of God, I have at least to be one who dares to be that bold preacher. So this is what Swami Vivekananda, having realized that, learned that at the feet of Sri Ramakrishna, having experienced that in his own, through his own sadhana, uh, shared that through his talks and lectures across America and Europe, and then back among his people in India, and then set together in motion this machinery, this machine called Ramakrishna Mission, through which this knowledge percolates even today. Okay. Any question up to here? You're all happy? That's good. So let's proceed. Okay. So here Swamiji takes up a little bit of understanding of cosmology and psychology because he then wants to go deeper into this. So to go back to our preliminaries, there are first two things to be understood. One, the psychological aspect common to all the Vedantic schools, and the other, the cosmological aspect. Okay, so he'll explain a little bit deeper. Let me see if I can make this brighter. Yeah. Okay, I will take up the letter. I will first take up the letter. Today we find wonderful discoveries of modern science coming upon us like bolts from the blue, opening our eyes to marvels we never dreamt of. But many of these are only rediscoveries of what had been found ages ago. It was only the other day that modern science found that even in the midst of the variety of forces, there is unity. It has just discovered that what is called heat, magnetism, electricity, and so forth are all convertible into one unit force, and as such, it expresses all these by one name, whatever you may choose to call it. But this has been done even in the Samhita, the old and ancient. So Samhitas are a part of the earlier part of the Vedas. And these ideas have been discussed there thousands of years ago. Old and ancient as it is, in it we meet with the very idea of force I was referring to. All the forces, whether you call them gravitation or attraction or repulsion, whether expressing themselves as heat or electricity or magnetism, are nothing but the variations of that unit energy. Again, you see, what is that knowing which everything can be known? What is that one unity out of which all this diversity has come? You can see that uh, uh, approach here. Whether they express themselves as thought, reflected from antakarana. So you see, thought is a force and it is experienced in our inner mind, antakarana. Anta means inner, karana means organ. Just like we have bahishkarana, the external organs. What are they? We have got the five organs of action, hand, sweet mouth, etc. And we have five organs of perception, Karmendriya and Jnanendriya, which are our five senses. And then we have got this inner sense, Manabuddhi, Chitta, Ahankara, the internal, that is called the Antakarana. The inner organs of a man, or as actions from the external organ. Let me read that again. Whether they express themselves as thought reflected from Antakarana, the inner organs of men, or as action from the external organ, the unit from which they spring is what is called prana. So this is the theme. The prana is the just is equivalent to that white light which becomes diversified in the whole spectrum of different colors. Different manifestations are there. Physical energy, mental energy, spiritual energy. And so pranayama, when they teach that in the yoga, it doesn't mean just simply controlling your breath. Actually, breath is a physical manifestation of the energy called prana. Prana is something else, much deeper than that. Um, Let me finish this and then I will probably give an example, explanation of that. Again, what is prana? When all this universe shall be resolved back into its primal state, what becomes of this infinite force? Do you think that they become extinct? So in the modern physics sciences, they say when galaxies or solar systems disappear into what is called the black hole. It's called black hole because the intensity or its force of gravity in the center is so strong that even light cannot escape it. Light itself is sucked into it. And so if there's nothing, if light does not come and hit our retina in our eye, we cannot see it. So that's called black hole in that sense. So Swamiji says when all the forces get resolved back into its primal state, that state is called, at the time it's called pralaya. So at the time of pralaya, what happens to this whole universe and this tremendous amount of energy that is there? And do you think it becomes extinct? Of course not. If it became extinct, what would be the cause of the next wave? Because the motion is going in wave forms, rising and falling, rising again and falling again. So that is this other idea. This is this other idea that we see in the Vedanta tradition. The idea of cycles, of kalpas. Things happen not in a linear way. Things, the srishti remains, srishti means projection, sthiti, it remains in that particular form. Samhara, it resolves back into its course from where it had come. And then again it rises. And things happen in cycles. So the Vedic sages worked that out and said, no, while there might be small cycles like our daily, the lunar, annual cycles, but this whole universe also comes in cycles and projected and it resolves to its course. That means it becomes manifest and then it resolves back into the unmanifest. The Sanskrit word for the unmanifest is called avyakta. Avyakta means unmanifest. It is there, like all the colors have become merged into the white light. They're all present in that white light, but they are just not differentiated or visible as colors there, but they are present there all the time. So here is the word Srishti, which expresses the universe. Mark that the word does not mean creation. I'm helpless in talking English. I have to translate the Sanskrit words as best as I can. It is Srishti or projection. Something was there in a potential form and it expressed itself. It was potential in a seed and that expressed itself into a tree. So that type of idea. It was there all the time, it's just now taking some forms. The formless is becoming form. At the end of a cycle, everything becomes finite, finite, and is resolved back into the primal state from which it sprang, and there it remains for a time quiescent, ready to spring forth again. So it goes in the potential state, and then it becomes projected into the kinetic state. It's like a swinging of the pendulum. So while it is swimming between the two ends, it has got that kinetic energy. But when it becomes temporarily, when it stops temporarily at the end of the swing, what happens to that energy? All that kinetic energy has become potential energy. In physics, we study that. So the sum total of the energy still remains same. It's just that at the ends, it all becomes potential energy. At the bottom, it all becomes kinetic energy. Between these, it flows. So what happens? So that is Srishti, projection. And what becomes of all these forces, the pranas that we see in the universe, they too are resolved back into the primal prana. And this prana becomes almost motionless, just like the pendulum swinging and stops momentarily, absolutely still. Okay, so not entirely motionless because somehow it vibrates within. It means all the vibrations have become so intense that it is not visible, sort of, not experienced. And that is what is described in the Vedic Sukta. So there is a special composition in the Vedas called the Vedic Sukta. Uh, it, it's called Anidavatam. What it means, it vibrated without vibrations. So here what they're trying to do is they're struggling with the language. Something was experienced, but the language was not there to express it because this language is about this physical world here. And it talks about vibrations and all those things in a way, in time, space, the way we are experienced. That reality is so fine, so refined, so subtle that these words are not sufficient there. So they struggle with that. There are many technical phrases in the Upanishads difficult to understand. For instance, take the word vata. Many times it means air, and many times motion. And often people confuse one with the other. We must guard against that. And what becomes of what you call matter? So, yes, we said all the forces they get resolved into that universal force called prana. What happens to the matter? So, the forces uh, the forces permeate all matter. They all dissolved into what is called akasha. So akasha and prana. The sum total of all the matter gets resolved into that unit source, which is called akasha. The sum total of all the energies in the universe get resolved into that force called prana. And that prana is behind the universe and behind the Akasha and Prana are the fundamental two things out of which this whole universe has been projected. And those two forces also work within our own body. They all dissolve into Akasha, from which they again come out at the beginning of the next cycle. And this Akasha is the primal matter. Whether you translate it as ether or anything else. So at the time when Swamiji was around there in the scientific world, there was this concept that all matter has come out of ether. So he picked up that word and said, hey, maybe you might want to use that. But it's just a definition, a word that is there. Whether you want to translate as ether or anything else, the idea is that this akasha is the primal form of matter. This akasha vibrates under the action of prana. Okay, so here's the thing. In vibration, two things are there. There has to be some form of matter, and then there has to be some form of energy that makes that matter vibrate. So for example, when you heat something like air particles, uh, the particles vibrate faster and faster, and the measure of that vibration is called the temperature of that. Water temperature goes up, air temperature goes up. So the heat is the energy that is injected into that air, and the air vibrates faster. See, so air is that particle is the matter, and the energy is the coming the prana, and together there is more or less of that vibration. This aka vibrates in the action of prana, and when the next srishti is coming up, as the vibrations become quicker, the akasha is lashed into all these wave forms, which we call the sun and the moons and the systems. So here we come across this wonderful explanation from the Vedic sciences as how this universe has come. It did not come out of a big bang in a very physical way. Yes, that's what's observed in the physical level. But where did it where did that big bang itself come out? What banged, if you say, if you want to ask that question? It cannot come out of nothing. And the Vedic sages say, well, something had resolved back into that finest form, unmanifest, at the end of the last cycle. And then in the beginning of the cycle, it burst forth, and that all that energy that was cooped up in the singularity is then released. And as the vibrations roll forth, then all these subatomic particles and the electroatomic particles and atoms and molecules and everything rolls forth until it makes this complex universe with its all life forms that are there. So those forms come out of Akasha, and that energy that was there trapped in there, that also begins to flow. And we feel that energy flowing in us as the muscular energy, as the electrical nerve energy, as the thoughts in our minds, as buddhi, ego. These are all different manifestations of that energy. And behind that is that consciousness that is there. This akasha vibrates under the action of prana, and when the next srishti is coming up, as the vibrations become quicker, the akasha is lashed into all these waveforms, which we call the sun and the moon and the systems. So, and we are also another one of those waveforms. So, there might be waves within us as thoughts, chitta vritti. We are also a bundle of energy as human beings, or as plants, or animals, as the planet Earth, or the solar system, or the galaxy, or the whole universe. They're all different whirlpools of energy. And you will see these forms everywhere, how that energy flows. It's a wonderful study to see and observe when nature creates or projects itself, when they are projected on similar patterns. And you understand something about how nature creates, how there's energy and all those flows in there.
Swamiji,
Yes.
Swamiji, when you say Akasa here,
Hmm.
is it space or
No, no. See, when you say that, that's the different meaning here. Space here means, like this space in the house, or the space outside the planet Earth. You say spaceship, you go out in space. No, no. That's not the idea. Word Akasha here. The definition is very clear, Satesh. It says when all the matter is resolved to its ultimate cause, that ultimate primal matter, Akasha is the primal matter.
yeah, okay. No, I was because I mean like when you
Yeah.
talk about words like Akas, sometimes means sky.
So that's why all this
Yeah. Yeah.
keep the definition in your mind, otherwise you'll get all confused. So Akasha here means that primal matter into which all forms, all matter gets resolved at the time of pralaya, and out of which all material forms manifest at the time of projection. How does it happen? This akasha vibrates under the action of prana, and those vibrations becomes your subatomic particles. So you see in quantum physics, so when they're trying to blast a atom in the what is called this particle accelerators, and they observe these various subatomic particles and gluons on whatever they're called, they appear, they spin for a while and they disappear, and you see a little trace of it, and they say, oh, these are the various subatomic particles are there. So what happened was that for a moment its vibration came down to be caught by the measuring device, and then again it became too high and so it disappeared. And what we call electrons and protons and all things, they have become stable, and then they begin to combine with each other and becomes an atoms, and atoms becomes molecules, and like that, as the vibration begins to drop, then the gross world has come in there. But as the vibration goes higher and higher and higher, then we lose touch. So if you remember when we are talking about this particular, Shimon might be interested in this, because we're discussing this idea of Maya. When the disciple went to Swami Vivekananda and said, what is this Maya? And Swamiji basically lifted his mind by his own power. He raised his mind to a higher frequency. And the disciple narrates that explanation, his experience, saying that as he was sitting on the bank of the river, he saw that everything was vibrating, and suddenly everything disappeared. And then he felt a vibration. If you read that closely, he felt a vibration in his own mind, in his own brain and mind, and then his mind reached where everything disappeared in, and what he experienced was an ocean of consciousness. So what Swamiji did was, by the sheer power of his own mind, he lifted the mind of the disciple, and as his mind went to higher and higher planes of consciousness or planes of energy, his experience changed. I'm not saying experience of the world. Something was there which he was experiencing as the world when his mind was at this lower plane. When his mind went to a higher plane, the same thing is now experienced as something else. And at the highest level, everything was experienced as consciousness. It was not samadhi because he was still aware of his sense of I am and little bit of difference. But yes, all the forms had disappeared into the formless. And what he was experiencing more and more is that variety was tending to the unity, into that oneness, and that ultimate level where everything merges into that highest consciousness. That consciousness is called Brahman or Atman. It's there, here and now, all around us, within us and outside us. The problem with us is that our minds are caught in this very low plane of existence where it functions through these five senses and acts through this the gross body, and we are sort of trapped in this cocoon, this shell of this human individuality and personality, and that's where we are born, we live, we die, and and that other dimensions of existence, the other planes of existences, are not experienced by us. The Vedic sages shut down the or control the physical energy. They control the energy of the senses, they control the energy of the mind, and that energy that is harnessed, intensified, they were able to lift it, and then all these other planes of consciousness were experienced until everything was experienced at the pure consciousness, in which they also become identified with that being. So they say, I am Atma Brahman. This Atman is that infinite consciousness. And that experience is what is called realization, self-realization, mukti, etc. Yes, Shaman.
Oh, Swamiji, so the primal prana is when it's in a state of anidvatam, does it sort of self-ignite? Is it like a process like breathing in and out that's a constant process of shrishti emerging from that primal prana? Is primal prana sort of self-igniting a constant process, or can it be dormant for is there a cycle and a rhythm to that primal process?
Yes. Yeah, you have answered the question. Like we said, I was talking about everything is in a cycle, like a pendulum. Imagine a pendulum is swinging. So when the pendulum goes to the extreme, it slows down, slows down, slows down, and then it sort of momentarily stops. Okay, so that would be the time when everything has resolved into Akasha and Prana. But that is sort of a momentary type of stop. And then sort of all the energy is very intense there, but not manifest. And then the reverse cycle starts and it begins to swing out. So that's where the Srishti starts. So that's how it is sort of like a engine running on its own. Okay, but it's in a cyclic process. So they say, how did this creation came? Uh, it came the way it was in the previous cycle. Yatha Purva Kalpavat. So whatever is happening in this cycle happened in a similar way in a previous cycle. Yatha means just as, Purva, previous, Kalpa, cycle, what means as if, in the same way. So it's like, you're like today is very much like what happened yesterday. The sun came and, sun came, no, sun was still there. The earth rotated and we had a feeling that the sun rose. Anyway, that rotation happens and it happens in a similar way. So like in that way, you can say everything is in cycles. Yeah. That's a good question though. So it doesn't require like some god is somebody sitting there and he says, okay, now you go out again, or it's at his will whether he's going to pause it and say, now you can hold for a little longer type of thing. No, it runs. Yeah.
Also, Swamiji, is Srishti another? Is it a synonym for Maya? And also, is that primal state of prana, when we talk of Shakti, is that really just an overlay onto that natural excitation of that primal state of prana? Is Shakti more implicit in that primal prana?
Prana is actually a manifestation of that Shakti. Okay, so Brahman is that when it's all very transcendental, it is in that moment where it's only pure consciousness. And that same Brahman, when it starts, begins to manifest Srishti Sthiti Samhara, that is called Shakti. Okay, and the manifestation as it becomes more and more differentiated, those are the prana. So we say the original prana is, when we use the word prana here, is that here in this description is that ultimate sum total of all the energies. But down the line, as it's manifesting itself during the time of Srishti, in the time of creation, it becomes more and more differentiated. So, for example, in our own body, we say there are 5 pranas: prana, apana, vyana, udana, samana. These are the 5 different manifestations of that one prana. All right. Or when we were reading Kashmir Shaivism, then we talked about the Shakti that's at the macrocosmic level and said that being or the energy called Parashakti, the Supreme Shakti, became Khechari, Gochari, Dikchari, and Bhuchari. This means it becomes more and more grossified, and we can experience that energy flowing in us in these different uh, layers or different grades, you might say. So, yeah, did it make sense there, Shivain?
Yes, thank you, Swamiji.
If not, you can, yeah, you can.
Is Srishti the same meaning as Maya?
No. So Srishti means that phase where it's manifesting itself, projecting. Okay. So there are three phases. Something projects, something then sustains itself, and then it resolves to its course. So the Srishti means the projection part of it. Maya is so the different meanings of Maya. Maya, I would say it is when we go and listen, read those lectures of Swami Vivekananda on Maya. I think it will probably resonate with the concept of relativity in our modern science. That means you experience what we experience depends at what level our mind is. So when Swamiji was trying to explain to his disciple, who after reading the book says, I still can't grasp what is Maya, he tried to give him that experience by lifting his mind to different levels. And he saw that in the spectrum of experiences or experience, a spectrum of creation, Prakriti, nature, there are different planes of existence. There is this physical world of names and forms in our physical body, and then the subtle world of mind and all that, and then the causal world there, and ultimately it's all pure consciousness. This spectrum is probably what we might call is Maya, where the one light has become differentiated, has become many. But if you say it's a beam of white light that falls on a prism and then it falls on the wall and you have this whole spectrum of colors, but on that wall, if there's an ant, and if you ask the ant, what is the color? The ant will say, well, I'm in the red space, so this is everything is red here. Another one will, in a blue space will say it's blue. But really, each ant is experiencing that white light in a way that depends on where that ant is sitting. So if you imagine that our mind can move up and down in this spectrum of consciousness, then what we experience, whether it's a physical world or the subtle world of heaven and Swarga, or the highest at Brahmaloka, or it goes beyond Brahmaloka into the pure Brahman. That spectrum is probably the word for Maya.
Thank you, Swami.
Swamiji,
Yes.
Swamiji, the prism that you talked about
Uh-huh.
is prism the ego? So is ego the differentiator between the universal consciousness and the relativity?
No, in the Vedanta lecture, Swamiji will say the prism has got these three sides. And what are the three sides? Time, space, and causation. Kala, Desh, Nimitta. Space, time, and the sense of cause and effect. So that is the prism. And the white light of consciousness passing through time, space, and causation becomes differentiated as this whole universe.
So, so my question, Swamiji, is what is the line separating the knower and so what is that which creates the sense of experience? Is it the ego, the the
Ego is a
finest?
part of it. Ego is a part of it. You experience because you are I. But there are other things in there. You've got a mind, you've got memory, you've got the senses by which that perception is taking place. All those things come together to create a perception, isn't it?
Yeah, but the preliminary thing which first brings the distinction
That
between
is the, yeah,
me and
that
someone.
first, it's like in a space you shoot some soap bubbles. Okay. So the film of moisture that forms the boundary of a bubble that separates the inner space inside the bubble and the space outside, that you might say is the ego. And at the time of samadhi, that ego disappears. That means the bubble bursts and you feel yourself one with that universal consciousness. So that's why in samadhi, the ego goes.
Okay.
And that's why the ego we are constantly trying to tell, ye must go, but it doesn't go. not everyone is trying to send it. Most of people are wanting to keep that ego. Nice, Anyway, so there's a lot of thoughts and ideas here. The way to study this, the way I study this is, you don't read this type of lectures just like a paragraph. You read one part, and like, for example, and then you read it again. And you pause and say, have you got that idea? You move to the next sentence only when you think you have that clarity. So it's more about studying and not just reading like that. Each sentence is trying to capture some idea, and then that whole paragraph will try to say. So it's more like a bit of a meditation and a contemplation. We are trying to get hold of these ideas in a consistent way. Uh, Even though Swamiji has explained it in so much detail, still these ideas are still a bit subtle. So in our Vedic tradition, what we're doing is Shravan, listening. Then Manan would be, you take this up tomorrow and think about it, read and contemplate and try to think about these ideas of Akasha and Prana and Kalpa and how everything resolves into the course and everything is projected out and all that. That is called Manan. You're trying to capture those ideas that Swamiji has encoded in this language here. Nididhyasan is going deep into it and meditating on that, deeply. What is he trying to talk about there? So when we take that process, then you'll find that within your own mind, you'll have those bursts of knowledge. Then suddenly the penny will drop and things fall in place and say, I think I've got it. But don't think you've got it. You've got a flesh, that means you're making some progress. That's the joy of study of the scripture, Swadhyaya. And that means a lot of work, It means that in a discipline of, mm, diving deep and trying to grasp these ideas. So here we have presented just a sort of a overview, and then Swamiji will use this, and you'll find that these ideas are repeated again and again and from different angles and all those things. So more and more light will be thrown on it. But try to reflect on these ideas so that you have a lot of clarity. So when he develops this, as he goes down into the deeper into the topic, he'll have some clarity about those ideas, um, and it'll help you understand those things better. My suggestion would be is don't wait for me to read this and explain this and spoon feed this to you, but you take some time and read these things on your own, and try to understand as much as possible in your own way. And then when I go through this, you'll find and note down any questions that came to your mind that you couldn't understand. So when I go through this and explain, hopefully some of those questions will get resolved. If not, at that time you can ask, and they will be very meaningful questions and very useful to you and make it more fun for me also. So that's the homework. Where did we finish? We are going to take up prana in motion. And yeah, please revise and do a little bit of reading on your own. That way it'll be fun. So I think it's a good place to conclude today. And yeah, as usual, Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.